Maybe you felt it too, that quiet exhaustion, not of the body, but of something deeper. The soul, a kind of weight that isn't visible, but presses into every breath, the weight of holding on to outcomes you can't control, to people who no longer feel you, to identities that once protected you, but now confine. We hold on, not out of greed, but fear. Fear of losing what once gave us meaning. We cling to certainty because the unknown feels like a void. But here's the sacred paradox. What if the void is not your enemy, but your gateway? There comes a moment in every spiritual path, subtle, sacred, and often unspoken, when the soul whispers, "You no longer need to carry this." This video is not a promise of quick healing. It is an invitation to remember what your spirit has always known. Letting go is not abandonment, it is a return to essence, to presence, to that quiet space where you meet the divine without effort. Today, we'll walk through 5 veils, 5 illusions, emotional traps, and false teachings to arrive at something more true. Not a technique, but a frequency. Not a belief, but a becoming. And perhaps by the end, you'll feel just a little bit lighter. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Be careful with what you expect. Not because it's wrong to desire, but because expectation, when held too tightly, becomes a hidden prison. You may not even notice it. It sounds like spiritual language. I'm manifesting. I'm calling in what I deserve. But underneath the words, there's tension. A quiet fear that if things don't unfold the way I imagined, I've failed. This is the invisible error. Not dreaming, but demanding. Not envisioning, but attaching. Modern psychology reveals something ancient mystics already sensed. The more rigid our outcome, the more we suffer when life flows differently. This is the root of spiritual perfectionism, where even surrender becomes another goal to achieve. So how do we shift? Start here. Set an intention, yes, but then let the path be soft. Instead of asking how it should happen, ask instead, what if I met this day with curiosity, not control? And at the end of today, reflect gently. What moment brought me back to life? Not what went right, but what felt alive. This tiny pivot changes your entire frequency, from resistance to receptivity, from ego loops to soul flow. Letting go begins not with loss, but with loosening the grip on what must happen. And sometimes the very thing you feared missing meets you in a way you never expected. Letting go is not the same as running away. There's a subtle, dangerous confusion in the spiritual path. The belief that detachment means silence, stillness, or appearing unbothered. But this is not true freedom. It's emotional exile. You can't release what you haven't fully welcomed. You can't surrender what you've never dared to feel. Many call it peace, but beneath it is buried grief, an anger wrapped in mantras, a heart trying to numb itself through spiritual language. This is the trap of superficial detachment, a kind of emotional bypassing dressed as transcendence. Real letting go begins with presence, to look at the emotion, to breathe into the sensation, to say, yes, you're allowed to be here. Here's your sacred practice. Find a quiet space. Close your eyes. Inhale gently, then exhale slowly. Observe. Where in your body do you feel tightness, heat, or heaviness? Don't push it away. Just be with it. 10 minutes. No fixing, no changing. This is not suppression. This is alchemy. You're not getting over anything. You're moving through it like a river that never resists its own current. And sometimes that's all it takes. One honest breath, one moment of realness to stop pretending you've healed and actually begin. Sometimes the ego doesn't show up loud or proud. Sometimes it shows up enlightened. I've let that go. I'm beyond that. I don't let things affect me anymore. But behind these polished words, there's often a subtle tension because the ego isn't just about superiority, it's about protection. And when we rush to appear healed, we risk abandoning the very parts of us still aching for love. This is spiritual bypassing, when letting go becomes a costume instead of a journey. You might convince others, you might even convince yourself, but the body always remembers, the nervous system always knows. Letting go is not about being untouched, it's about being unafraid to feel. So here is your sacred mirror. At the end of each day, ask, am I truly at peace, or just pretending to be okay? Not to shame yourself, but to call yourself back, to tenderness, to honesty, to the version of you that doesn't need to impress anyone, not even the universe. Letting go in truth is not a performance, it's a return to humility, to presence, to the quiet, sacred work of sitting with what is until it no longer controls you. That's not ego, that's evolution. There's a common myth in awakening circles that letting go means detaching from the world, living weightless, untouched, above all earthly things. But this idea creates distance, not only from life, but from love, because true spirituality isn't escape, it's intimacy. Yes, there may be a phase where you isolate to hear your soul, but eventually, inevitably, life calls you back to dishes and deadlines, to conversations and cooking, to the soft, sacred rhythm of being human. There's a story that repeats itself in many awakened hearts. They tried to leave the world behind, only to realize that being in it with awareness was the real liberation. Spirituality isn't about living outside the storm, it's about learning to breathe differently within it. Here's a living practice, small but radiant. Before your morning coffee or tea, close your eyes for 5 breaths. Whisper a word like stillness, presence. Feel it land inside. As you speak to someone today, pause. Feel your feet. Listen not just to the words, but their soul. These are not interruptions to your practice. They are the practice. You can meditate with your hands in the sink. You can pray in the sound of laughter. You are not here to escape matter, but to make it sacred through your presence. There are moments when words aren't enough, when insight isn't what you need. You need release, ritual, something ancient that speaks to the body, not just the mind. Letting go is not just a thought, it's a frequency shift. And some shifts require fire. Across centuries, fire has been used to purify, to transform. In Hermetic and indigenous traditions, it was never just destruction. It was a portal to a new reality. So today, you're invited into a sacred practice. Take a piece of paper, write something you're ready to release, a regret, a belief, a name, a memory. Sit with it, read it aloud, not with anger, but with reverence. You carried it for a reason. Then, when ready, burn it safely. And as it transforms into smoke, whisper, I throw this regret into the fire of my heart, and in the ashes, I remember who I truly am. Watch the flame. Watch your body. What stirs? What softens? This isn't performance. It's recalibration. You're not erasing the past. You're reweaving your essence so that what once haunted you now hums quietly in the background as wisdom. Letting go is not forgetting. It's remembering yourself without the weight. Maybe now you feel it. A subtle quietness where there was once gripping. Not everything needs to be solved. Not every wound needs to be explained. Some things simply need to be released into the mystery, into the arms of the universe, into the silence that holds us all. Letting go was never about losing. It was always about remembering who you are without the noise. You are not your expectations. You are not your suppressed emotions. You are not even the one trying so hard to let go. You are the space beneath all of it. You are the breath that returns. After the exhale, you are the stillness that remains when everything else fades. Before you sleep tonight, place one hand over your heart. Whisper, "Today I allow. Today I soften. Today I release everything that is not mine to carry." And trust that the universe, always listening, always watching, fills every space you clear with something more true. Let go and find everything